Welcome viewers to another episode on Stories Lost. In this episode, we explore an interesting report from the north of Norway. Two berry pickers find something other than blueberries in the low-lying shrubs. What starts as a chance encounter will later end in heartache. People to this day ask themselves, was it fabrication? Was it a prank pulled by American soldiers? Or was it something that we are yet to understand? We who follow this issue know that the aftermath of unexplained observations often can have long-term implications. The emotional and physical consequences of intense scrutiny and public ridicule are sometimes a price that witnesses are forced to pay, and keep paying, simply because their reported experience reached the ears of others. Reasonably, skepticism does not necessarily need to lead to scorn and bullying. Questions are key to understanding an issue. There is a Chinese proverb that states, "He who asks a question is a fool for a minute, but he who does not remains a fool forever." That begs the question, how should we go about asking questions that show adequate respect for the inquiry, as well as the people queried? This episode takes us to the north of Norway, in the 1950s. The reported events take place at Øyfjellet, a mountain located in the Vefsn municipality of Nordland County. The landscape around Øyfjellet is characterized by dramatic cliffs, steep slopes, and lush green valleys. At the base of this beautiful Norwegian mountain lies the picturesque town of Mosjøen, where, at this point in time, two sisters lived. Two sisters who, unexpectedly, were drawn into a strange story. But was the fault their own? That which later hit them like a ton of bricks, was it all originally of their own volition? Were these two ordinary girls attention seekers? Or were they just too open, too honest about an experience that no one could make sense of? This Friday morning in 1954, the sisters Edith Jacobsen, 24, and Asta Solvang, 32, were on a berry-picking trip with their uncle, Halvdan Jacobsen, on Øyfjellet. There were scarcely any berries to be found, and eventually the two sisters wandered off alone in the terrain. How far away the uncle was is difficult to say. Eventually, the sisters agreed to explore a nearby bog to see if there might be more berries to pick there. In the two newspapers, Nordaland's Folkblad and Helgeland's newspaper from August 1954, the younger sister Edith talks about her experience. Suddenly, we saw a man approaching us from a distance. At first, we thought he must be another berry picker, but when he came towards us, we saw that he wasn't carrying anything with which he could collect the berries. We went to meet him while wondering what kind of stranger had made his way out to these parts. Then he smiled and extended his hand to greet us. I smiled back and was about to shake his hand, but he just quickly brushed his hand against the inside of mine. He started talking, but we didn't understand a word he said. It didn't resemble any language I've heard. I have learned a bit of German and English, am working on a lingophone course in Spanish, and have heard some French and Russian on the radio. This language, on the other hand, was very soft and melodic. It seemed to have few consonants and no coughing or spitting sounds at all. It flowed like a continuous stream and was not divided into words. When we realized that the man must be from a distant country, we began to look at him more closely. He was of medium height, had regular, handsome facial features, dark long hair with a natural wave. His complexion was nicely suntanned. We didn't notice the color of his eyes, but I think they were slightly slanted. His hands were beautiful and expressive, with long, fine fingers, like what I imagine a master pianist must have. He wore no rings. He wore something that looked like a jumpsuit, but he had a wide belt around his waist, so it could have been pants and a blouse. The blouse closed tightly at the neck, but was otherwise quite loose. I couldn't see any buttons or zippers or anything similar. The color was khaki brown. We didn't notice his shoes. There was always something calm and trustworthy about him. I didn't feel the least bit nervous or afraid of the man. When it was clear that we didn't understand him and he didn't understand us, he took out something to draw with. It wasn't paper, at least not what we mean by paper. It looked like some kind of grayish pocket mirror, and he took it out of a pocket. Then he drew on it with something that might have resembled a pencil. I didn't notice it closely. He drew some circles. Then he raised both arms out towards the bog, then pointed at us, and then at one of the circles. After that, he pointed at himself and at another circle. I immediately had the impression that he wanted to tell us something about the solar system, but it's very possible that I was wrong. I don't know if the circles were meant to be planets. The man made a hand gesture indicating that we should follow him. Then he turned and walked across the bog. We trudged after him, and a short distance further, we saw a strange object. It was gray-blue and looked like two enormous pot lids placed against each other. But honestly, I don't know how to describe the color. It appeared mostly blue-gray, but that doesn't mean I've seen a similar color before. The diameter could have been about 3 meters, and it was 1.5 meters high. Because the man was still so calm and convincingly friendly, we still weren't afraid. But we did think it was a somewhat strange find here in the middle of the wilderness. We walked up to the object, but he gestured that we shouldn't come too close. He certainly couldn't stand upright in it, but probably had to sit. When we reached the object so that we could see it, the man nodded and smiled at us. Then he opened a sort of hatch on the top edge of the brim that ran around the middle of the object. The hatch went up and slightly forward. He crawled inside, feet first, and closed the hatch behind him. The last we saw of him was him waving and smiling at us. The object began to hum faintly, like a large bumblebee, and the strange craft slowly lifted while rotating around its own axis. Only then did it occur to me everything I had read and heard about flying saucers. When the craft had risen 20-30 meters, it hovered in the air for a moment, then began to rotate very quickly, and with tremendous speed, it shot straight upwards. Soon we couldn't follow it with our eyes anymore. The newspapers have since called it a flying saucer, but I want to say that I have never used that word when I've talked about the episode to anyone. Asta and I agreed that we wouldn't tell anyone about what we had seen. Now that the man and his craft were gone, and we were left with our berry baskets without the slightest bit of evidence, it all seemed so unbelievable and fantastic that we were afraid of being laughed at if we said anything. We met our uncle a little later, and I don't understand how he didn't notice anything unusual about us. For my part, I walked around in a daze and felt like I was talking nonsense while thinking about what had happened. It was Asta who told it first. She couldn't keep it hidden from her husband, and then it spread throughout the whole town. A journalist from Nordlands Folkeblad heard about it and alerted the police to get the story confirmed. We were questioned by the police, and on Thursday, we were taken up to Oydalen for an on-site inspection. There were no traces, but that wasn't expected either, as 6 days had passed since it happened. Since the story became known, we have been overwhelmed from all sides. We've received lots of letters from individuals and organizations that investigate flying saucers. We couldn't go into town without being stopped and having to retell everything. Many people laugh at us, and many are angry because they believe we are trying to make fools of the whole town. But we have only told what we saw and heard as best as we can remember it. We saw it at the same time and perceived it the same way. But the pressure on us has been so great that sometimes I start to wonder if I've gone crazy. It's so fantastic that I can well understand why even people who have known me my whole life refuse to believe me. People can believe what they want, but I sincerely wish that someone else had had this experience in Oydalen. A priest, or a police chief, or other serious, respected men whom people would believe. This was how Esther described the strange event. Alongside her account, the press recorded a plethora of opinions that spread throughout the local community. Machinist Halvdan Jakobsen, the sister's uncle, who was on the berry-picking trip, was utterly exasperated when interviewed by investigators. He said, "I never dreamed that such a fuss would be made over a poor blueberry-picking trip. Because I am the uncle of Asta and Edith, I have found myself in a tricky situation. I don't want to accuse them of lying, but one thing is certain. No such craft as the one the girls describe took off from the blueberry woods that day. I was never more than 3 to 4 minutes away and would have had to see or hear something. No, those flying saucers, they exist in only one place, inside people's heads. Most people will just laugh at such stories, but that's not right. It's dangerous that people have gotten these things into their heads. We hear about it from all corners of the world. It's a weapon in the Cold War that creates uncertainty and fear of war." The sister's mother, Mrs. Jacobson, was of a different opinion. I have to believe that my daughters are telling the truth and that they really saw what they say. It is terribly strange, but there are so many strange things in this world. That the man should be from another planet seems too incredible to me, but I don't know much about such matters. I would have just dismissed the whole thing if it weren't for the fact that I know my daughters. Arvid Øye and John Brechen from the Highway Department stated that they believed the sisters in question. We believe what has been said. People shouldn't be afraid to believe in something unusual. We know the ladies. They are mature and credible. We have no opinion on where this man came from, but isn't it reasonable enough that people from other planets might have come as far as or further than us? Mayor Anderson, the local mayor of Mosjøen, expressed his disbelief. No, I can't bring myself to believe this. It's unbelievable how this story has come about because the two ladies are known to be sensible and credible. I would rather Mosjøen be known for other things, such as the great sports facility we have, or the pleasant villa area. Local boat builder Mikael Mjaland told investigators at the time, I don't want to get involved in such things. I know a lot about boats after 60 years as a boat builder, but I don't know anything about what flies in the air. Maybe there are such things as flying saucers in America and other countries, but here in Vefsn? No way. The worst we have here is the Trangskaringen, the southwest squall through Trangskaret. This powerful wind can be quite destructive. It has overturned my boathouse twice. Gunhild Christiansen, a local resident whom investigators met at the harbor quay in Mosjøen, stated, I don't know if the ladies imagined they saw something or if they deliberately concocted the whole story, but nonsense is what it is anyway. Can sensible people take such a story seriously? Evidently, there were mixed opinions among the local community. The newspapers were also full of more or less accurately reported stories these days. Not only in Norway, but also in Europe and especially in the USA, there was an incredible interest in this case. In Helgeland's newspaper on Saturday, August 28, 1954, one of the sisters is interviewed, without being named, but UFO Norway believe it might be the youngest, Edith. In the article, it is clear that the attention the story has attracted has detrimentally affected the sisters. Exasperated, Edith exclaims, What can I say? I think it's unfortunate that we have ended up in such a situation, and we haven't had any peace from phone calls and inquiries from both home and abroad. It's unfortunate, but we have only told the truth. A bright spot, however, is a letter we received from a woman. It was posted in jar. She tells us that she once saw something similar. She describes it as a flying saucer up close, but when she told people about it, she was just laughed at. She tells us that she understands very well how difficult it must be for us right now, and tries to comfort us as best she can. The letter gives the impression that she is a good and wise woman, and we were sincerely happy to receive it. The article in Helgeland on August 28, 1954, concludes, It has deeply affected the ladies that their story is being so strongly doubted. The sisters have the very best reputation among people, and until this story came up, no one who knows them would have dared to suspect them of dishonesty of any kind. According to what we have been informed, Mrs. Solvang has once again assured police officer Stephen Stevenson that she and her sister have spoken the truth from beginning to end, and during the last conversation, the lady burst into tears because she felt as though people did not believe her. At the same time, a fact has come to light that might strengthen the wife's statements. It turns out that the wife's husband talked about the incident to his colleagues at work the day before the story was published, and he told his colleagues that his wife had behaved very strangely upon returning from the trip. She was agitated and lay awake all night without being able to sleep, and he felt convinced that she had experienced something that had made a strong impression on her. When she finally told him about the encounter with the saucer, the husband said to her, "But this is nonsense. I can't tell anyone about this." Asta replied that it was entirely true, and that he was free to tell anyone he liked, which he did, and this is largely why the story became public. Now, it might be argued that the husband was also in on the joke, but people who know him say it is completely unthinkable that he would have done something like that. The editor of Helgeland, B. Bjerkmo, took such an interest in the case that he covered it in the editorial on Saturday, August 28, 1954. He wrote, "The saucer affair from Ufjeled is now starting to take the form of a comedy or tragedy. It depends on the point of view. We have before us two adult women who are considered to be credible and equipped with normal intelligence. They are 24 and 32 years old, respectively. The older one is married. They are mentally sound and balanced, dutiful, and generally respected by all who know them. The two ladies tell the police that they have seen a flying saucer and greeted its pilot. Are these ladies out for fun? If so, the prank has resulted in the ladies having to go into hiding, the police considering charging them with giving false testimony. The result has been weeping and gnashing of teeth. But then it is no longer fun. The ladies must expect to be subjected to people's gloating smiles for a long time to come, and then it has developed into a tragedy. It can certainly be argued that it is self-inflicted, but it is still a tragedy. And then we have, after all, the possibility that the ladies are telling the truth, and it can be said that there are indeed some in Mojuan who believe them. But the vast majority do not place the slightest trust in the sisters' explanation. An American helicopter pilot has come forward to refute the possibility that it could have been him they talked to. Local police officers assure us that there is not the slightest trace of a saucer on Oufilé, and a relative of the ladies who was with them on the berry-picking trip claims that he was never more than 100 meters away from them. Clearly, this indicates that the episode could not have taken place. So many circumstances speak against the possibility that the ladies could have told the truth, but they still might have. The two ladies tell the police that they have seen a flying saucer and greeted its pilot. Then the tragedy becomes significant. For our part, we honestly don't know what to believe anymore. We are inclined, just like the majority, to doubt the story. It is so difficult to do otherwise. But on the other hand, we cannot quite bring ourselves to join in the laughter. The sisters stand by their explanation. If it is true that they are telling the truth, then they have found themselves in the most desperate situation imaginable. As long as they do not tell anything different, or it is established beyond any doubt that their story is pure fabrication, we choose to leave the matter as an open question. The saucer affair has now developed to the point where two women are sitting on the defendant's bench. But according to good legal practice, all doubt should benefit the accused. That will be our position going forward. But who was this American soldier that editor Björkmo mentions in his editorial? An article from an American newspaper, taken from the Times-Picayune, New Orleans, August 29, 1954, sheds some well-needed light on the matter. On August 28th, the Associated Press was on the scene and reported the following surprising briefing from Stuttgart, Germany. A helicopter pilot from the United States Army said Friday that it was not him who scared two Norwegian women into thinking they had seen a saucer pilot. And he doesn't look anything like the man the women said they saw. Sergeant Billy C. Foro, 29, from Council Bluffs, Iowa, was one of several pilots conducting a secret exercise in Norway last week. Reports from Oslo said that two women picking berries were surprised by a dark-skinned, long-haired man who tried to talk to them. Then he disappeared into a strange vessel that looked like two soup plates. Rumors circulated in Oslo that it could have been American pilots playing a prank. Foro, the first of the pilots to return, said, "The only thing I know about the women is what I have read in the newspapers." Journalists note that Billy is a striking opposite, with short hair, and is 1.78 meters tall and weighs 68 kilos. The United States Army would not comment on the matter, as the trip was classified. In 1994, when 40 years had passed, both sisters are alive and well. At this point in time, UFO Norway was in contact with the older sister, Åsta Solvang. The older sister tells investigators, with a mix of bitterness and frustration, "We have been made to look like fools. It has been written about us in all the newspapers, saying we were just making things up. So, we are not interested in having more published about us." Åsta also mentions that she has not been able to put the episode behind her during these 40 years. Apart from a period of insomnia, which might not have been so unnatural after all the commotion, Åsta experienced a 6-month bout of eczema that covered her entire body. This condition began the same year as the incident. The eczema oozed, spread across her skin, and caused severe itching. This could be a result of psychological stress following the experience in all the writings. When asked if they still stood by what they said back then, she replied, "I couldn't possibly say something like that if it wasn't true." She also mentioned that she hadn't bothered to read either UFO books or any other UFO literature afterward, except for newspaper and magazine coverage of their own story, which caused her frustration. Not even Adamski's book, which, after all, contained many parallels. The investigator deemed her sincere and later wrote that he found absolutely no reason to doubt her account. He confessed that he was tempted to consider the event as something on the borderline of the physical world. This explanation would account for why her uncle, who was so close, didn't experience anything at all. We move forward in time, another 30 years. It's autumn 2024, and the blueberry forest on the mountain of Oyfjellay bears fruit once more. Rubber boots compress the purple heather flowers, ignorant of the surprising encounter that caused such a commotion 90 years prior. The trees stand as silent witnesses to the creatures that scratch at the earth's surface. They neither smirk nor ask questions. The trees look up and down in equal measure, just as complicit with daydreams copied from books, military pranks on civilians, and even actual interdimensional travelers. Can we ask question like trees? Solemn, accepting and open to the unexpected answers. A fool only for a minute. This is it for today's episode. We hope you have appreciated like we appreciate you, our viewers. Feel free to join the conversation below in the comment section.